What's up, and welcome back to the greatest teacher of all time, where I, Quincy Dawson, interview teachers of color tied with their philosophies, strategies, and personalities. Today, I've got Robert. What's up, Mr. Penuela?
How are you, Quincy?
I'm good, man. Thank you so much for being here.
No, absolutely. I thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. So I started as like a student teacher at your
Mhm.
school, with Leo, Mr. Maguillon, my mentor. And I like to think of all you guys, that small group of 12 teachers there, as like my mentors who like led me and guided me through things. And I want to say for you, the biggest advice or like impression you gave on me is that I need to document my experiences, right? Just being thoughtful and document everything I do. You were like the one who, I know my school told me, but you were the one who like really convinced me to actually journal after all my classes to like really reflect on what I did through the day.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, right. And it really helped me, right? And so one ways that you do your documentation is your Project Pen Instagram page.
Yeah, and I've let that falter a little bit. I didn't have the energy to push through like you have because we started around the same time.
I think so. Yeah. So, but you started it though. I think that's the important part. But can you tell
Yeah.
me why or like where that idea came from?
Well, it's one of those things where when Instagram started, my friend was like trying to convince me to do that. And I thought to myself, who's gonna want to know like what an English teacher in East LA does? And as you know, time went on, Instagram started getting bigger and bigger. I finally jumped on myself. I think I got an iPhone, and I'm a photographer to begin with, so I love documenting. It's especially my daughter growing up and everything like that. So I really enjoyed that. When we started the school, I had to start an Instagram account for the school and a Facebook account. So then,
Wait. Are you still behind that?
um, I I started it, and then as people were coming in, I let them take it over. People would submit different content, and then in 18, I had to like withdraw a little bit, and then come back to it, right? So like right now, I'm one of the main people that puts the content on there. So then I'm like, hey, what do I don't want to be selfish and only put my content from my classroom. So that's why I started that, and then giving like perspective because like I've always mentored teachers, but I started officially doing it like 4 years ago on a full not full time, but like a an ongoing basis with teachers in the district. So I thought about just capturing that in that stuff that happens or those ideas that I have. And it's one of those things where like after chemo, I wanted to not only to have a perspective, but like record what I was doing and what I was going through and stuff like that. And I wanted to not to be recorded for any kind of notoriety or anything, but I think for myself, because like I've always told new teachers the best thing to do is write a journal, right? Like reflect on how your day went or your week went, but that really helps with lesson planning,
Hmm.
right? As I'm sure you've seen, right? And the fact that it just gives you other ideas and asking those deeper questions eventually leads you to like just grander ideas, right? A better approach, a fresh start. Because sometimes we do that automatically, but writing it down really helps. Because like there's not one teacher I've never met one teacher who's never said, I have the same lesson plan. I do it exactly the same way the whole day. By
Yeah.
the end of the day, that lesson plan had gotten better, right? So your last period of the day, you are like on fire, right? It's like glittery and beautiful and everything's working out. So, okay, what worked? Asking those basic questions, right? So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's cool how you keep yours like centric to your classroom. Because when I made my science of the week one, I started as a private page, right, where no one can see, but I would still like post every week about what I was doing through my journey through education,
Yeah.
right? And it wasn't until at the end of the school year I finally made it public, like people see it, and I was like, cool, I'm done with this. And there was someone who actually commented saying like, hey, you should keep this going. Like, we want to know what you're doing in your classes. And I'm like, interesting. With this thing starting for me documenting, you guys actually want to see this too, which is again something I value about yours too. Like I really like your page.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Project Pen. You should get back to it. Yeah. But another thing too, so with this documentation experience, you're telling me you've been teaching for 23 years. Is it the 23rd or
This is the 23rd year. Yeah.
okay. So yeah, with that, you've probably seen a lot of changes in education, right?
I have. It's one of those things where the fact that it's when you're in it, it's kind of hard to realize the changes, right? Because like unless you're reflecting about it. But I'm also in a bubble where I'm in California, in Los Angeles, and LAUSD. So whereas a different superintendent comes in, they have different focuses or foci, but everything else is still the same. But you're right. There has been changes. There's been a lot of changes. Yeah.
So so I want to know what specific changes, but also we can't downplay this. You and a group of teachers started a school.
Hmm.
So you must have wanted to see a change, or maybe you didn't like the changes, or like tell me about that.
That's true. You're right.
Yeah, come on.
It, it- and all of us are very good at playing that down.
Super good.
Yeah, we're all very humble, and I'm probably the least humble. But the fact that we were working at a school that was a large, comprehensive 5,500 student school, and the school was built for 1,200. And when the school was broken into small schools, we questioned it. We were afraid, but it really worked. It really worked for us. So when we were absorbed back into a larger comprehensive school, and then we saw the contrast between what we had when we were working independently back to being told how to do, what to do, we we weren't happy. And we knew that that ship was way too big. So that's what that was one of the reasons we started our own school, to the fact that we really felt that a STEM school was needed in the Boyle Heights area. And this is an area that we're all connected to one way or the other. Like I didn't go to school there, but my mom did. And so that's one of the reasons why I went back to Boyle Heights and everything. And that's where my family got started. And I wanted to give back to the community where it helped my family. And my mom still works in the community. So when we started our school, the changes that were being made were not progressive. Seeing, the whole thing about how to help students rather than like a smaller cohort of teachers is the same thing that they've been doing for 50, 60 years. So you're right. So some changes weren't happening fast enough for us. So we left. And we felt that we did like the STEM focus because we had these amazing STEM teachers, right? Math and science teachers. And we felt that the students who were going to colleges and universities who were wanting to do engineering, for example, a lot of them were like either dropping out because they didn't have the background. And we felt that if they went with a certain background, it would help them succeed rather
So,
than that.
so check this out, right? So one of the changes I want to see in education, which I think might be kind of a new change, but like there are a lot of focus schools, right? Like a
Mhm.
STEM focused school or liberal arts focused schools. I feel like those schools get you prepared to do this STEM job or to do this liberal arts job, right? That's a change I don't think I too much like that trend of, right? How are you feeling about that?
Yeah, it's one of those things where like we're in that ugly phase of history for different reasons. I mean, not for different reasons, but these different things are happening. And I think this is what we have right now in our country, in our area, to help get through our thing. I mean, when I first started teaching, I was thrown into a classroom of like 40 students a classroom, and I didn't know what my neighbors were doing. I didn't know who my students had for math or history or English. But like, so having a smaller cohort, that was our main focus. That was our number one thing. The STEM thing was our secondary thing, um, in my opinion. But it just helps give a focus. Like, and I'm not even a STEM teacher. I do English, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, I do, in my mind, like I help students, we have a lot of kids who wanted to be pre-med or wanted to be writers, or other things, but the fact they wanted to be in a small school. And I think unfortunately, we had to have some kind of focus, like some kind of like thing to sell. And it's a really good sell. But I agree with you. Like I think having a certain focus just helps our school get noticed. But I do feel we do a good job with preparing students for a STEM school or just a university life. Like when I think you knew those students, Robert and Ashley and Vanessa, and when they came back after their first semester, we had dinner and they were telling me on the slide that, hey, Mr. Penuela, I just want you to know I got an A in English. And like I was like, this is, are you serious? This is awesome. And then they were all telling me they were doing really well in their English classes. And so I just felt, and I was the only English teacher they had, because at that time I was the only English teacher. So I felt like, okay, I was doing something right. And yeah, so
Yeah, and again, I was there. I got there the year they were graduating, and
yeah,
just from like the small glimpse of I saw them interacting with you and like that core staff, like you're about to bring tears to my eyes. Like I know how much that group meant to you guys. You know?
yeah. I mean, because you were there for our first prom.
Yeah, yeah,
Remember? And you went to Target and you bought an outfit real quick, and then you brought it and the cap and everything. And that to this day, I say that was one of the best proms I've ever been to, because it was a family party without any drama. And it was great.
yeah. And that's just part of like the aura of a small school, right? Where you can do these things and they mean so much more than a regular prom at the big 5,000 student school. You know?
Yeah. So I mean, everyone knew everybody.
Yeah,
And you're right. So the idea of a small school where like two kids in my homeroom, right, who don't get along, don't like each other, never work with each other, but for that prom, we're helping each other with their prom king boxes. They were helping each other, and they were running against each other, which is that never happens,
it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. So it's always an extraordinary end of the year thing because you see how people grow. Um, yeah.
Yeah, man. That is so interesting. But maybe continuing on changes in schools and everything, right? So I think this is a recent change and I want to know how you feel about these recent book bans. And right now I'm going to refer to an article called Banned in the USA: Rising School Book Bans Threaten Free Expression and Students' First Amendment Rights. And starting with this quote from the article, it says, objections and challenges to books available in schools are nothing new, and parents and citizens are well within their rights to voice concerns about the appropriateness and suitability of particular books. And this is from a website called Pen America.
Yeah.
So yeah, book bans aren't new, I guess. So how do you feel about these?
Um, when I was in college, I remember talking to professors regarding new literature, right? And you know, in my generation going to college, we thought we were the first ones to ask that question, but that's always been a question. Like, what do you do with new literature, whether it's Chicano literature, African American literature, LGBTQ literature? And basically, what different professors the way the answer was, eventually, what happens is you open up the canon, you just widen it,
Hmm.
right, and then you bring it in, right? So now under American literature, you have Chicano literature, you have African American literature, whereas Asian American literature, Indian American literature, right? And so now book bans are one of those things that it's really sad to see because like every year I see articles like like Temple City nearby, or I I don't want to misname a city that may have a book ban or may not, but it happens a lot. And I've seen that growing up, and whether it was Harry Potter or of Mice and Men. Of Mice and Men is always banned for one reason or another. Huckleberry Finn, right? And I know that with my partner, when we first started dating, I brought it up to her, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And her point was because her father was in Vietnam and his best friend was Black. And he knew the racism towards him. And so my partner grew up thinking that if it's racist, gotta get it out. And I understand that. And then her question was, well, can't you teach something that has the same issues, the same ideas, the same themes, but just better written, or without a racist context? And I thought about it, and I would have to do more research, but my answer was I don't think so, because any book that came out after that would be based on that.
Interesting. Yeah.
And so book bans, I mean, it has the N word, right? It has that word, and you and I talked about it because you were a student there. You were teaching there, and I had you come in and talk to the students about it. Like, how do you feel about this literature being taught today with
And
this?
just more context, 98% Hispanic at the school, right?
Yeah, I would say 99.
99. Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and so book bans are those things that are not new, but the reason I think the reason they're even more popular today is the same reason they were popular 50 years ago. Fear,
Hmm.
right? You have people going to politics, local, statewide, and they promise to make these changes, and that really brings attention to them, right? So don't worry, I'm gonna keep America white. I'm gonna keep these gender issues off our kids' eyes and stuff like that, because if you keep kids from looking at those kind of books or reading those kind of books, it's really gonna change the reality, which it doesn't, right? But
Yeah, right. And so I think Huckleberry Finn might be an interesting example because it's definitely has like that, those racist connotation and everything in it. But another quote from this article says, among the titles in the index, these are the banned books this year, there are common themes reflecting on the recent backlash and ongoing debates surrounding the teaching and discussion of race and racism in American history, LGBTQ plus identities, and sexual education in schools.
yeah,
Right? So with things like that, right, it seems like more of sexual education, right? People who just happen to be lesbian, gay, or bi, right? It's not. All right, I don't want to put like my answers in there, but like, what are you thinking about those? Like, is that? I don't think it's the same vein as Huckleberry Finn.
no, but it's still the same type of people who want to keep that out of the scope of children. They don't want children to see it, hear it, or speak it, or talk about it. And if you deny it, they won't know about it. They won't know about it till they see it on social media or in the news or something, or they see two guys kissing in the street. Like, mommy, what's that?
But I
But
feel like that's like an uncontrolled context, right? If you have the ability to control how they're introduced to this in like a safe, responsible way, I would think that would be the preferred method. No,
that's what
you
you and I. That's what you and I would think.
yes. Do you know what the other side says to that response? Do you know at
Um,
all?
I don't. Years ago, we had bought a book for someone, and it was one of those books where it could have been one of the titles, My Two Dads or something along those lines, right? How to start school, kindergarten, knowing the fact that you have two fathers, not a father and a mother. And so I, I'm sorry, could you repeat your question again?
Yeah. What do you think the other side says to that?
Oh,
Like, why? What's their
I
reason for not wanting it to be introduced in a school?
oh, not introduced into school?
Not introduced in the school. Yeah.
Yeah, because like they just, I think from what I've read, they don't feel it's appropriate that children shouldn't be exposed to anything, either
I get you. Yeah.
um anything that's racist, because that never happened, or the fact that it happened a long time ago. We shouldn't be bringing that up. We're all American. right? These different types of arguments that are repeated over and over again. So that's, yeah. But and like the article that you're referring to, it talks about how half half of the people who are passing these laws are people who are in local government or state government, right? They're just trying to, whether it's say Georgia or Alabama or what have you, or within a school district. And they're also like the Supreme Court has issued out, these are the protocols you need to follow for each district to ban a book, to remove a book, depending on the content. But these districts are going around that and still banning books without having those discussions. So that's right there, that's not right. Just now that's where the rights of people are being impeded.
Yeah, and doing this for your 23 years, are there any books that you have taught in the past that are banned now that
Yeah,
you know of? Say it
most
again.
of most of the books I've taught. So whether it's a Mice and Men, that's on most likely on your list. Bless Me Ultima, it's a Chicano lit book. Their eyes were watching God. Um, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Let's see. Oh, different plays, right? Whether it's A Streetcar Named Desire or it's interesting because from that list, that article you're talking about, some school districts will ban the books or plays unless you're in AP literature.
That's interesting.
So the fact that if you're taking AP literature, then I guess you need to be exposed to it because for the exam. But if you're not, then you should. So it just it's it in that regard, it's elitist, right? But
Really?
yeah. So but I think most of the books I've taught have been banned at one time or another.
Wow, that is so interesting. And like again, back to the beginning, like the changes you've seen, like that is a big change that you've seen, right? Like,
Yeah,
do
so
these things like sorry, when you hear about a book ban from a book that you've read and taught through for your classes, does it like hit you out of left field, or is it like, okay, I could see that one coming?
no, because like I've been reading about that since I was in high school,
Yeah.
right? And so I remember Temple City, and I would show the article. I had copies of it for students for a few years, but they had these several books that were like student favorites banned. And Temple City is not very far from where I live and where I work, but and that's just right here in California, in LA County. So it, when I bring it up to students, I'm very proud. Like, I have a poster in my room that says, I read banned books. I should just get a poster that says I teach banned books. But it for me, it's one of those things where it's always happened, but it's not going to stop me. Um,
Mm.
and I'm very fortunate that I work in a district where we're not banning books, right? Because I do have former students who are teachers where the student parents didn't want them reading Catcher in the Rye. So she had to go off and find a different text for that student to read while the rest of the class read it.
Wow.
So
Yeah, I think in my AP class it was like three different books, and we could choose to read Catcher in the Rye if we wanted to, or if we approved of it. You know?
yeah. Yeah. So I mean, so yeah, and that's one of the books that's always on that list, Catcher in the Rye, you know.
Yeah.
And it's funny because one of the English teachers we just hired a little over a year ago, we were in the library. I helped he had never been to the library, so I walked with him and the students to the library. And we were sitting down talking, and he tells me his two favorite books to teach are Bless Me Ultima and Catch in the Rye. And and when we hired him, I really wanted him to work with us because I know that he's a really good teacher, and I knew that other schools were going to try to poach him or want him. So when I went out there to talk to him after the interview, he came by to visit once. I'm like, hey, I really want to develop a writing program here. I would love it for you to be on board and this and that. And we're very collaborative. And so but last year was kind of crazy, right? Post lockdown. So this year, when he told me his two favorite books are Bless Me Ultima and Catching the Rye, which are my two favorite books to teach, I told him, I just looked at him and I said, I really want to hug you right now.
Oh man,
I,
6 feet.
I love teaching those books. Yeah. And I do tell students that these books have been banned. Like, Bless Me Ultima is on that title for Arizona and Texas right now for the last couple of years. It's been one of those big controversial books. Anything that's Chicano, anything that's brown, it's got to be thrown out. It's illegal to teach. So, yeah. So I find it irritating and disgusting, but it's one of those trial by fire eras of our lives that we're going through.
Yeah, man, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
But wow. Again, thank you for all this, Robert. Your years of experience, your insight on these book bans and the changes you've seen in education, everything. There are some of the reasons why I think you might be one of the greatest teachers of all time.
Oh, thank you, Quincy. I really appreciate that. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course, of course. And also, with the support of Transcendence Children and Family, I want to present to you this $100 prepaid gift card for you to use with your students in your classroom and things like
Oh,
that.
thank you. I was not expecting that. That's awesome.
Yeah, man, I got you. I got you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Quincy.
So yeah, after the camera's off, I can get your address and everything, figure out how to send this to you. But again, thank you, Robert. You deserve it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that, Quincy.
Thank you to everyone else for watching The Greatest Teacher of All Time, where I, Quincy Dawson, interview teachers of color, tied their philosophies, strategies, and personalities.